Healthy Today show, and today our topic matter is on hypoglycemia, aka low blood sugar. They estimate probably between 10 to up to 20% of our population suffers from hypoglycemia, lending itself to a lot of irritated and upset people. But anyway, it's defined as follows. It's a condition in which the pancreas overreacts to repeated high blood sugar intake, and what happens then is the pancreas produces what it perceives as being excessive sugar, but it overproduces insulin, and when that overproduction of insulin occurs, then the blood sugars actually can lower too much, lending itself then to the following symptoms: headache, dizziness, irritability. Literally people can pass out and faint. Anxiety, depression, insomnia, craving for sweets. The symptoms can occur generally within a few hours after the ingestion of the particular sugars or the issues that occur, as we're going to go further on here. The causes of hypoglycemia are multifaceted, and it's a little bit complicated, but I tried to give it as much in a nutshell as I possibly could. One of the major causes, and the same that goes with diabetes, is eating refined carbohydrates that lead to a carbohydrate sensitivity and then thus leading to excessive insulin production. Other things can contribute as well too. Candida infections. Adrenal exhaustion is a big one. What happens with adrenal exhaustion is you'll have an overproduction of cortisol, and that messes up everything having to do with how your insulin is shot out of the pancreas, how the body utilizes it. Thus, anytime you are a high-stressed person and end up with adrenal exhaustion, you can end up with hypoglycemia. Glandular malfunction or hormone imbalance in the pancreas, the thyroid, the pituitary, the adrenals, or the liver. So see why getting to the bottom of this is very difficult, and the time that it would take most doctors to try and figure out what's causing the hypoglycemia would be pretty encompassing. A major contributing factor, and I'm seeing this quite a bit with things like the monster drinks and the pot of coffee before you go out the door, even kids, the big 40-ounce big gulp soda. Excessive caffeine and other stimulants to try and keep going, because there seems to be so much pressure to keep going, that people will take these stimulants, and that messes in turn with your blood sugars and your pancreas. I'm simplifying it as much as I possibly can because it's a little bit more complicated than this. But bottom line, when we're talking about this, what we do have control over, obviously, is going to be, number one, our diet. You want a diet that's going to be high in fiber, in which you're eating complex carbs with fats and proteins and fiber. So what happens then is you don't get that blood sugar spike. In turn, then you don't get that severe release of insulin, and you don't end up with low blood sugars a couple hours later. Now, also too, focusing on eating only complex carbs such as beans, brown rice, and vegetables at each meal. Making sure, once again, that you have fats, proteins, and fibers to slow the sugar down. Probably one of the best diets I can refer you to on one of our prior shows, and it'll be on youtube.com/VHFILM. There's a diet or a section on our YouTube site that's called the metabolic diet. And that one is a pretty good diet to follow if you do have hypoglycemia. It also was listed for weight loss and for any type of blood sugar issues, but that may be a little bit more comprehensive diet to follow. You're going to want to avoid all sugar, refined white flour products. I call it white death. Juices, particularly in their full state. Maybe in diluted would be okay, but in their full state, absolutely not. Alcohol and processed foods such as cookies and cakes and crackers and cereal. Now, this hypoglycemia can lend itself later on in life to diabetes. So recognizing that if you are diagnosed with hypoglycemia, or if you have the symptoms, because it can be a little bit more difficult to diagnose than diabetes, because if you have diabetes, you know, your blood sugars will come out, and if you're above 100 to 120 or in there, you're borderline diabetic, and then boom, it goes up from there. With low blood sugars, it's typically if someone's 70 or below in a 5-hour glucose test, but oftentimes people who are hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic do not show up in this particular 5-hour test that the doctors conduct. Now, I mentioned some of the other glandular potential issues that people can have, and so doctors can perform full thyroid panels, not just the TSH test, but the full thyroid panels, adrenal panels, liver panels. Those can be all indicators of potentially not being able to utilize sugar, or that can affect your pancreatic insulin production. Now, supplements, if you notice on here, there's a long list. And the problem with this particular disorder is, since it can be potentially caused by so many different things, there's a lot of potential variations. Then that's why I have so many supplements listed. And it may take a little bit of trial and error for you to figure it out. I know I have hypoglycemia, and I basically do just about everything on here other than the garlic, because I'm allergic to it. But I'll tell you, when I am faithful about my supplements, it really does help. And with my diet, I don't end up with those sugar lows that actually literally I have collapsed from in the past. So a good multiple vitamin, and I'm not talking about from your local grocery store or a warehouse coming out of China. We're seeing so many things coming out of China tainted and having inadequate amounts and not tested by the FDA to make sure that what it says on the label, it actually has it in there and it's not a toxic chemical. So a good United States made multivitamin, go to a health food store and get some recommendations there. A B complex, one tablet, and particularly maybe like a B50, you can go as high as a B100, 3 times a day. The Bs help you do, or they're lost during times of stress. So the Bs are very necessary in order to properly metabolize carbohydrates and fats and proteins as well. Hence why they're very effective in helping with fat burning as well too. Chromium picolinate. Chromium picolinate, 200 micrograms twice a day, can help stabilize blood sugar. And if you'd like to, you can add something called GTF, which is a type of chromium that can also help with that glucose tolerance factor in stabilizing blood sugars. Calcium citrate, magnesium citrate combinations, and I'm not talking about Tums that the doctor recommends for your calcium source or something out of a warehouse. We need the absorbable form of calcium with magnesium because it's very necessary to have these minerals and other minerals for carbohydrate metabolism. See, 75 years ago, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation because some of these things would be in your food. They're not there anymore. We have all this commercial farming, so as a result, we are missing a lot of the vitamins that we would otherwise have that could help keep our sugars more stable. Ester C. And the reason why I say ester C is it's a buffered C, and I don't mean ascorbic acid from your local grocer or warehouse, grocery warehouse. C is lost during times of stress, and it's very important for support of adrenal insufficiency. We're going to have a separate show on adrenals and adrenal exhaustion. If I had to guess, I would say probably a third to half of the women, particularly in my age category, have adrenal exhaustion, so we'll save that for another day, the topic. L-glutamine, very well researched. We give it a lot to alcoholics to help them with their sugar cravings. But L-glutamine, 1 gram on an empty stomach, can be very helpful for blood sugar stabilization, or excuse me, blood sugar and sugar cravings. It also helps the metabolism of protein in the body as well too. Milk thistle and dandelion. When you want to talk about digestion, you're talking about milk thistle and dandelion along with ester C. What they do is they help the liver excrete bile and aid and assist liver enzymes. So when you have a better or more adequate digestion, having to do with bile excretion and liver enzymes, then your body is better able to handle your sugars. The liver can process these sugars. Because remember, your liver performs over 500 different functions, one of which is helping with metabolizing your sugars. Pantothenic acid. It's one of the B vitamins, and you're going to find it in B complexes, but generally not enough to help support stress and adrenals or adrenal glandular response. 500 milligrams a couple of times a day is helpful. Omega-3s and 6s. And now, I know we say oftentimes omega-3, 6, 9, and you'll see those, but I'm seeing more and more omega-3, 6, 9 with canola oil. And canola oil is a genetically modified and altered oil. That, bottom line, is what it is. And I understand people use it in cooking. I don't recommend it, but definitely you don't want to take it when you're trying to take a healthy product for your health. So an omega-3, 6, and you may have to get separate bottles. I know in my store I have some good ones that you don't have to. They're a bit more expensive that way. But they do help support hormonal balance. And if you're like me and you're taking it throughout the day, it also aids and assists blood sugars and blood sugar stabilization as well. Copper and zinc. Without adequate amounts of zinc and copper, you are not going to have a proper release of insulin. And with our soil being so zinc depleted, and not so much copper as much as zinc, we're finding that a lot of people, we're getting a contributing factor to blood sugars, thyroid problems, other glandular problems, and immune system because of the lack of zinc in our soil. So oftentimes, you can get some in a good multiple vitamin. If you can find it with 30 milligrams of zinc, you don't need to add this extra. Otherwise, you need to add in a little extra, totaling at least 30 milligrams of zinc. Digestive enzymes. Because the quality of your food, probably the majority of you out there are eating, is enzyme poor, I recommend digestive enzymes in the aiding and digesting of your food. Now, in times when people have what is called pancreatitis, which is an inflammatory disorder of the pancreas, there are enzymes called pancreatic enzymes that help you break down food. I'm talking just about a good digestive enzyme, depending on your blood type. There's certain different types that we take. But these enzymes will aid and assist your body's ability to break down the food in a proper fashion so you digest it. And then garlic. Now, this was kind of a, and particularly there was a study done on kaolic garlic. And basically what it showed was it was excellent if you take 1 or 2 capsules of kaolic garlic when you're all of a sudden having an attack occur. For some reason, it tends to be able to help and shape and stabilize the sugars a little bit more and bring down that insulin. Once again, this is a very difficult thing to digest. Look back at the symptoms, and you can watch the show again in a few weeks. It'll be on youtube.com/VHFILM. Right now we have it on Comcast, and hopefully this will give you a real good idea with the symptoms and supplements that you can experiment with. This is treatable and helpable, but it does take a proactive behavior. Next, we're going to be moving on to the fitness portion of our show. Thank you. Hi, welcome to the fitness portion of our show. And today I'm going to go over a couple of exercises, some of which are yoga moves, or one of which is a yoga move, and the other one is a physical therapy move. These are movements and motions that can help with a little bit of hip and knee pain, particularly if you have a post-anterior or any type of movement inward or outward on the knee when you walk, or the hips turn slightly outward. From the sitting that we do, we tend to not get adequate amounts of stretching and release on muscles. So I'm going to show a position that hopefully the first one that can help release the hip. You're going to get an ottoman or a chair or just over the edge of your couch, and you're going to try and get as close to it as you can with a 90-degree angle going on right here, with your legs being about hip apart. The force of gravity forces your hips down into the ground. Now obviously you're going to lay all the way down. It's kind of hard for me to do that in TV land. But what you're going to try and do is with that force of gravity, bring those hips back into alignment. And then when the hips get back in alignment, guess what? It also helps the knees to be back in alignment. Another exercise, or the next one, is a yoga move that we use to prepare and stretch in yoga, but is also a physical therapy move that can help bring things in alignment and make you more aware that when things are out of alignment. What it is you're going to put your, whichever leg you're working, and you're going to switch legs once you complete maybe a 3 to 5 minute segment. But you're going to try and get it as parallel as you can with the rest of your body, bringing the other leg up as far as you can. And I know some people may only be out here or here, but trying to bring that leg up to the most top part of the leg, keeping this fully aligned and keeping the heels like as if you were walking, keeping everything bent up. What you should feel is a stretch all the way that runs from the tip of your toes all the way down to the back of your leg, in an even balance with the knees. Now you may feel more than one on one side pulling more than the other, and that's a real good indicator that you may have a little bit of malalignment. But if you can hold this exercise at night, maybe while you're watching TV for 3 to 5 minutes on each leg, you may find with time that you're going to have a lot less knee pain. Next, we're going to be moving on to the research portion of our show. Thank you. Hi, welcome to the Fit and Healthy Today show. This is our research portion. With us today is Ralph Turchiano.
And thank you for that intro. Now, first to start off, as far as a trivia question, what number of Americans, according to the American Heart Association, let's put it this way, have no heart disease risk factors, otherwise in good cardiovascular health? What percentage of Americans have no heart or cardiovascular issues? U.S. adults in particular. That will come back to towards the end. All right, now we talk about sleep. A lot of you out there have problems sleeping, and there's a real easy way to get, according to the European Journal of Nutrition, at least 39 extra minutes of sleep, which to some is quite a bit. Also, a 6% increase in sleep efficiency. Well, a magic ingredient that you can use for that is something called tart cherry concentrate. Yep, what they did is discovered twice per day, 2 servings of concentrate. The reason they're focusing on concentrate is because they're not trying to add too much sugar to it outside what naturally occurs. 2 servings a day of 30 milliliters of tart cherry juice, according to the European Journal of Nutrition, resulted in, get this, only 7 days, an additional 39 minutes of increased sleep and better sleep efficiency. Now remember, 30 milliliters of tart cherry juice, remember tart cherry, not black cherry, is the equivalent of eating 90 to 100 tart cherries. So it's a lot better to do the concentrate itself. And again, just after 7 days. That's pretty darn amazing that something that has no side effects or cause you to sleep, walk, drive, or eat in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. All right, now we go next. They did a study on 70-year-old men and above, and they looked at how fast they walked. And what they did is they looked at these people over about, I'd say about the time of about a year. This was done by the British Medical Journal. They discovered some interesting things. The faster you walked, the more likely you were going to be alive by the time of the end of the study. In fact, they concluded this out of 1,700 men, and this was participating in what's called the Concord Health and Aging in Men, also published in the Christmas edition of the British Medical Journal. They discovered those that walked an average of about 1.5 miles, 1.8 miles per hour, of that 1,700, 266 died at the end of the study. Of those at 70 years or older that walked 3 miles an hour or faster, at the end of the study, none of them had died. So that's a pretty strong indicator as how fast you walk. So if you can, do your best. If you're going to walk, Try to walk an average of day at least at 3 miles an hour or more, depending on how many miles you walk. The speed of your walking is what they're talking about. All right, now following up with that, now often you hear about people that want to do better in studying as far as tests and things like that, and as far as studying in school. Often you'll hear there are no medications that increase test scores outside of your standard ADD drugs and so on and so forth. But there is. What they discovered, and this was published in what's called the Panmanivera Medica, what they offered and gave these students was something called pycnogenol, a pine bark. They met 100 milligrams of pine bark or pycnogenol per day. And this was done in Italy, and they took 2 groups of kids. They made sure they had about equal IQ to a verbal IQ test scores, so it couldn't interfere with the test that much. This is what they discovered. On 100 milligrams of pycnogenol, only after 8 weeks. 8 weeks, not a year, just 8 weeks. The study found the pycnogenol effectively enhanced the mental performance, including improved sustained attention, memory, and mood in students within an 8-week period. Students taking pycnogenol had higher test scores in university exams than obviously the control group. And not only that, there was an additional benefit. Alertness and contentedness improved significantly with the pycnogenol group, and anxiety decreased by 17% just in 8 weeks off of pine bark. I don't know if they're talking about anxiety for test scores or anxiety overall, but 17% in 8 weeks is pretty kick butt. Remember, not too long ago they had studied what's called psychopharmacology in regards to seniors and how it also increased their IQ, their memory, attention, and cognitive abilities on top of that. Really interesting, simple supplement that really tends to benefit you as far as school, test scores, memorization, cognition, you name it, all across the board, and fast. Better than a lot of the ADD medications out there that they're currently offering. Now, another thing that came to mind, and this has to do with BPA. You realize what 98% of your exposure to BPA, remember bisphenol A, that massive hormone disruptor that causes to gain weight, causes heart disease, birth defects, and still perfectly legal in the United States? Most of your exposure to this nasty chemical is, believe it or not, through thermal receipt tape. In fact, 98% of the exposure to U.S. citizens to BPA from paper is through receipt tape. Now, obviously, there's huge exposures to canned soups, sodas, waters, and everything else like that. But from paper, it's from receipt tape. The reason they discovered this is because they're trying to figure out how recycled paper products, like toilet paper, newspaper, and so on and so forth, are being so high in BPA. Well, it's because receipt tape was being added to the recycled papers. And so, keeping this in mind, Japan, for example, in 2001, one of the only countries that banned it. Well, as far as we're doing, as far as our stores, for example, hopefully by the time this show airs, we're going BPA free on a thermal register tape, which is something to think about since this is one very nasty chemical that should not be even anywhere next to our kids, including ourselves. So we're getting rid of the thermal paper, and hopefully for good within the next week or so, or at least by the time this show airs. Now, this is a military community. Our military community tends to get a lot of what's called tuberculosis testing. Now, you'll find one thing really interesting. There's about 4 blood tests out there: the tuberculin skin test, the interferon gamma release assay, the quantiferon, and the battery skin test. Now, they took what they call 2017 military personnel and tested them for latent TB. Of that 2017, 77% from one test of any of those tests showed a false positive. So that means if you're getting a TB test, do not accept the first result as the only result. And they said there's just basically most tests in the United States will yield you a false positive the first time. Now the second time they did the test, or a different test, it lowered it quite dramatically down to 11.4%, and by doing 3 separate TB tests, it kept it about the same at 11.4% for false positives. Now they believe part of the problem is in the testing itself. The testing itself may be causing some sort of false positive in regards to exposure, especially in the skin battery test, they said, on top of that. So that's something really to keep in mind as far as something that can cause you to go false positive. Now, back to the last trivia question. Now, this is something to think about to the American Heart Association. There are 7 recommended guidelines, and those guidelines were smoking status, weight, physical activity, healthy diet, cholesterol, blood pressure, and fasting, glucose, as well as the absence of any sort of cardiovascular disease prior. Of those 7 factors, basically only 6% of U.S. adults met the standard for good heart health, meaning that 94% of U.S. adults did not. So I guess you can say that's the other 94%. And no inference to Occupy Wall Street, 99%. Now keep in mind, that's just this generation. The next generation itself is we're looking at, remember, the children. And remember from the last show, 0 children made the clearance for good cardiovascular health. 0%. 6% of adults, no children whatsoever. And that's something to really think about when it comes to basically to your heart health. Now remember, this was published in the Journal of the American Heart Association, so that's something to keep in mind. In reality, I mean, if you want to reduce the bills down and you want to actually make progress and stop putting all your money into pharmaceutical company coffers, that's something you have to really start. So if you're going to be rebellious and talk about how tough the world is as far as enriching a lot of the wrong people, you're going to have to start first by basically taking care of yourself first, or personal responsibility. That 94% is way out there. You can't really make any effective change with anything when we first can't change ourselves, which is something we really have to look at. And outside of that, again, keep in mind, 41% of Americans are in medical debt. I mean, that's basically can't afford to make the medical bills as is today. So if you're going to turn it around, the first thing we got to do is change these figures. 6% is way low, and something that basically we can't contend with if we're going to maintain ourselves as a strong economy. Well, basically, that's generally what I have for right now as far as our studies, and that is all I got for tonight.
Okay, cool. Once again, do your research for yourself. We look at a lot of different websites to get our information and medical journal reviews, and seriously, do your research. And once again, too, there's a real push against supplements out there in Congress right now. Particular senators are trying to limit the freedom that we have in this country to choose our alternative medicines. So do your best to do your research. Write your congressman when you feel that it's duly noted. Thank you again for watching our show.